This video shows how to do basic image editing with Gimp. I'm going to show you how to crop an image, resize an image, do color adjustments, save as different file types, and some other more advanced imaging editing that you might be interested in. So let's get started. If you're going to be working with an existing image, you want to go to File, Open, find the image on the file system, and click Open. Here, let me resize the window so we can see most of the image on the screen here. And so the first thing I want to demonstrate is the difference between the display size of the image and the size of the image on the file system. If you look at the bottom of the image here, it says 33. So the size of the image that you're looking at on the screen is 33% the size of the original image. Here, let's change that to 100%. Okay, so it's a rather large image on the file system. It's directly from the camera. So when you make an adjustment here, you're not actually changing the size of the image on the file system. You're just changing the display size. And a little bit later, I'll show you how to actually change the size of the file on the file system. Okay, so once we got that looking nice, the first edit that I want to demonstrate is cropping. Rarely do you get the framing right when you take a picture with your camera. For example, in this picture, the plane is pointed left here, but there's more space to the right. There's empty space over here to the right, and that just looks kind of odd. And there's probably more sky in the image than we need also. And so we can fix that with cropping. To crop an image, select the Crop tool from the Tools palette and click and drag across the image. Don't worry too much about getting the dimensions perfect as you're clicking and dragging, because once you release the cursor, you'll have a chance to grab the corners and make the adjustment perfect. And it's a lot easier to get the dimensions that you want by dragging the corners than it is to try to get it precise from the beginning. And so, like I said, we want to have more of the extra space in front of the plane and a little bit less sky. And so that looks pretty good. Now, to actually apply the crop, I'm going to left click in the center of the image, and it will crop to the dimensions that I've specified. I'm going to undo this crop because there's something else that I want to demonstrate, and that is cropping with a fixed aspect ratio. I plan to use the resulting image after the crop in a high definition video that has a certain aspect ratio, and the random crop that I just did might not look right. And so what is aspect ratio, real quick? So aspect ratio is the ratio of length to width. For example, a high definition television is wider than it is tall. It has an aspect ratio of 16:9, meaning that if it's 16 units wide, it's 9 units tall. Now in terms of pixels, high definition television would be 1920 by 1080. So let's crop this image with that aspect ratio, keeping in mind that the picture is going to be used in a video with a certain aspect ratio. And so to lock the aspect ratio, I'm going to click and drag here. And so now the aspect ratio isn't locked. So let me specify a size that's 16:9. So we know that 1920 by 1080 is 16:9. And so that's 1920 by 1080. So let's lock that aspect ratio with the options with the cropping tool here. And now when I adjust, I don't have so much freedom, and so it's going to keep the same aspect ratio. And so again, we wanted to crop so that there's less sky and have a little less flexibility in terms of cropping length and width because it's going to have a fixed aspect ratio. But that I'd say that's pretty good there. Okay, and so again, to crop, you would click in the center of the image, and the borders would be removed. The next edit I want to demonstrate is resizing. That is, resizing the actual image and not just the display size. You might want to resize an image if you're sending it via email or embedding it on a web page, and you don't need a larger file. With more resolution. To resize an image, go to Image, Scale Image. Here you can resize by pixels, percent, and some other values. Pixels and percent are probably the most popular. Notice also that the idea of aspect ratio also comes up here. If you lock the aspect ratio with this input here, and so now it's locked, now it's unlocked. If you lock the aspect ratio, when you change the width, and so let's change this to 1920, when you change the width, the height changes along with it to preserve the aspect ratio. And so it does show here that we have 1920 by, it would change it to 1080 because we did have the 16 by 9 aspect ratio. And so now if I clicked on scale, it would scale the image. And so if I did it back to 100%, now this is the size of the image on the file system, 1920 by 1080. I'm actually going to undo that though, because I'm not going to be using this image. I'm not going to be sending it via email or web page. I actually want to preserve the maximum amount of resolution, because I'll resize it later in the video editing software, which you'll see in a later video. The next edit I want to demonstrate is color adjustment. Again, the image directly from a camera rarely has the best colors in terms of exposure, brightness, etc. For example, in this image, the exposure is pretty good for the sky, but not so much good for the plane. The plane is dark and some of the detail is missing down here. To make color adjustments, go to Color and then select one of these options. I normally go to Levels first. By adjusting levels, you get the best dynamic range of colors in your image. And what I normally do is drag this left handle to the beginning of where the input starts, and then drag the right, and the right handle is pretty much good where it is there. And I adjust the midpoint to get the brightness that I want for most of the image. So that looks pretty good right there. So I'm gonna select that. It's now we can do the before, and there's the after. And so before, the plane's kind of dark, the sky is about the right exposure, and the after, I've lightened up the plane. So you can see more detail in the plane. Now the sky doesn't look so good, but that doesn't matter because that's not the main focus of the image. Another color option you might want to consider is brightness and contrast, which is a fairly simple color option. So we could brighten up the image. It looks probably pretty good where it is. Maybe contrast could improve it a little bit. I'm gonna hit cancel here and compare. Yeah, it was pretty good where it's at. Some of these other options can really change the total feel of the image. So let's try color balance. And by dialing in these different colors, you can drastically change the sort of the feel of the image. Next up, I want to show you how to add text to your image. To add text, select the Text tool and click in the general area of the image where you'd like to add the text. And right now the size is pretty small, and so I'm going to go to the text tool options here and make that much larger. And we can also adjust the color here if we want to. Maybe find a shade of blue for the sky. Adjust the color. If you want to position the text, use this Move tool. So we can move it over there. Notice also that the text is a separate layer. It doesn't destroy the pixels of the image. Layers are kind of a more advanced subject. I might talk a little bit about layer later, but for now, just you can know that if the text is on a layer, it won't erase the pixels of the underlying image. Next up, saving your work. With Gimp and other multimedia tools, there's the concept of the project and of the media. If you just want a copy of the image that you can email or include in a video, select File, Export As. Specify a file type. I recommend JPEG or PNG, and the difference between these two types of files is discussed elsewhere. So let's find PNG here. And you'd also want to give it a name. So maybe I'll call this After Edits. And then I'm exporting a copy of this image now. And you can specify some other options. Depending on what file type that you specify, it'll ask you some other options. I'm just going to take the defaults here. Okay, what I did there was I exported a copy of this image. I still have the project that I can save. And if you think you might want to come back and make changes, such as maybe changing the text or making other color adjustments and things, you probably want to save a copy of the project as well. So to save the project, go to File, and if you've already saved it, it's already been saved, you can choose Save and it will just resave it. Here when I select, here I haven't saved it, so when I select File, Save, it's going to ask me where I want to save it. And so here you can also see that it's going to save a different file type here. And so this will be the project with all the metadata that goes along with the project. And let me save it to where I had this, where I saved the other file. And maybe we'll just call this biplane. And we can close everything. And now when we open, you can see that we have a copy of the image on the file system, but we also have the Gimp project. And if I open the Gimp project, I'm able to make changes to the image, such as the text here. And I don't think it's hyphenated, but if I wanted to change the text there, I could. And so that's the advantage of saving as a project, because if I open up that image that I saved, if I open up the image here, this, I can't change that text. It's part of the image. And so if you think you might want to make changes to an image, you want to save the project and all the metadata that goes along with it. Now for some bonus features. First up, transparent backgrounds. Sometimes you want an image to blend into its surroundings. Here, let me open up a couple of images here. We got this first one, and I'm going to open up this. I have this cartoon image. It's a JPEG file. We're going to open. So I'd like to copy this cartoon image into this aerial view of the field. So I'm going to select everything, copy, and go over here and paste. I'm going to paste it as a new layer so I don't destroy the image that's underneath it. There. That doesn't look so good because the background of the cartoon doesn't blend very well with the background of the image that it's over. And so we can fix that. Let's undo that, and let's go back to our cartoon image. And now I'm going to make the background of this cartoon image transparent so that the image will blend better with the aerial view of the field. And to do that, go to Layer, Transparency, Add Alpha Channel. Now when I cut out parts of this image, the parts that I cut out will be transparent. So basically I want to cut out all around this. I could do that with this magic wand, and if this was a photorealistic image, I would have to do that with this magic wand. Probably be the only way to cut out around the image. But it's not a photorealistic image, it's a cartoon image, and so there's an easier way here. I'm going to use the fuzzy select tool, which will select all pixels of an adjacent color, and it looks like that went all the way around the image. So Let's cut that and see what we get here. Looks pretty well. I guess we didn't go all the way around. We didn't go over here. So let me select there, and I can cut that. I'm going to select here. I'll cut that. I'll select over here, cut that, and maybe get that last part there. Okay, so that looks much better. And so now we have a transparent background for this image. So let's go ahead and select all, and we'll edit and copy. And now let's paste that back into this. And again, I'm going to paste it as a new layer so we don't destroy the pixels underneath it. And that looks pretty good. Well, I guess it's a little large. So let's resize it. And I'm going to resize the layer by going to Layer, Scale Layer. And let's maybe make it 75%. Looks like a good choice. We can change it if it doesn't look right. Okay, that looks pretty good. Actually, just one more quick change here. Based on the photograph underneath, I think it would look better if the plane was going left there. So let's see if we can, I think we can flip the layer. So let's go to Transform. Yeah, so we can flip horizontally there. That looks a little bit better. So that's how transparencies work. We could go back to this image and actually save the image with this transparent background. And if we were going to do that, you have to be careful what image type that you save it as, because not all image types support transparent background. In fact, the most popular image type for transparent background is PNG. So I want to be sure that I select PNG as the type. I'll just leave the name Cartoon Pilot, and we can click Export, and we get to make some choices here. I don't think we want to save the background color, so I'm going to select Export. And now we've exported this as a PNG file that we could include in a video or some other work. One more feature I'd like to mention, and that is Clone Stamp. Clone Stamp is a very useful feature that allows you to fill one section of an image with the contents of another. It sounds kind of complicated, but it's pretty simple. Here, let's do an example. Let's say that we wanted to have make it appear that there's more planes that arrive for this air show. So I can copy the contents of some of the planes over here to this empty section of the parking lot over here. And so to do that, I'm going to select the Clone Stamp tool, and it gives me a hint here. It says Control click to set a new clone source, and so I'll let my source be right over here. So I'm going to do Control click, that sets the source. And now when I click and drag over here, it's copying the contents from that source area to this destination area, making it look like we have more planes at the parking lot here. Now the angle's not quite right, and I could fix that, I guess. Actually, maybe a better example of Clone Stamp. Let's get rid of this brown patch in the runway here, and so I'm going to do Control click to select the source area, and we'll just fill in those brown patches, and that looks pretty good. And when you're doing this, you probably want to Control click a few times just so you don't get the same pattern repeated over and over, so it doesn't look so obvious that you use the Clone Stamp tool. There we go. Looks pretty good. Very powerful tool. I think you'll be surprised how often it comes in handy.